At Travis Air Force Base in California, volunteers began removing paint from the nose of an old B-29. The aircraft had arrived in pieces. Its wartime markings had disappeared beneath several later finishes. Its military career had ended decades earlier, and before it could become a museum exhibit, the metal had to be cleaned, examined, and prepared again. Then older lettering began to emerge beneath the paint. At first, it was only a trace. More careful work revealed the outline of a name that had been hidden through several assignments and almost 25 years at a weapons testing complex. The volunteers had not invented a name for the bomber. They were uncovering one. Miss America 62. The words connected the dismantled aircraft at Travis to an 11-man crew on Tinian during the final months of the Second World War. They also revealed the central contradiction of the machine's survival. This B-29 had been a combat bomber, a weather reconnaissance aircraft, a target-tug, and finally an airframe inside the China Lake target system. Its purpose and appearance had changed repeatedly, yet beneath those changes, part of its first identity had remained attached to the metal. The story began in Omaha, Nebraska, late in 1944. The aircraft was built by the Glenn L. Martin Company as a B-29-25MO. The final letters identified the Omaha production plant. The United States Army Air Forces accepted it on December 11, 1944, under serial number 42-65281. By then, B-29s were operating from the Mariana Islands against Japan. Every mission demanded long hours over open ocean before the crews reached defended territory, followed by the same distance home. Serial 42-65281 was assigned to the 24th Bombardment Squadron of the 6th Bomb Group at North Field on Tinian. Within the group, it became Aircraft Number 11 and carried a Circle R on its tail. Its first documented assigned crew was Crew 2409, commanded by Captain Bruce R. Alger. The 11 men divided the work of flying, navigating, operating the defensive guns, managing the engines and fuel, and keeping the bomber functioning through missions that could last many hours. A ground crew prepared it for the next flight after they returned. They also gave the bomber a name. According to the Travis Museum and the 6th Bomb Group Association, the name was connected to Captain Alger's newborn daughter. The year 1962 represented the time when she would be old enough to compete for the Miss America title. The aircraft became Miss America 62. A photograph from April 1945 shows the crew with the bomber. In a force filled with similar silver aircraft, nose art helped tie one airframe to the people assigned to it. A serial number belonged to the military record. A painted name belonged to the machine's daily life. The name also pointed toward a year 17 years beyond the crew's time on Tinian. Before the aircraft could reach that year, it first had to survive the war. The 6th Bomb Group flew precision attacks, incendiary missions, aerial mining, reconnaissance, and air-sea rescue support during 1945. No complete sortie list has been recovered for this individual airframe, but the group association credits Miss America 62 with 13 missions and 2 Japanese aircraft destroyed. It entered operations during the final months of the Pacific War and came through them intact. After Crew 2409, the aircraft passed to another 6th Bomb Group crew. The machine's history continued as personnel changed around it. When the war ended, Serial 42-65281 returned to the United States in October 1945. The war had given the aircraft its purpose. Peace removed that purpose almost immediately. Thousands of military aircraft were now surplus. Many were stored, stripped, transferred, or scrapped. For a surviving bomber, the next threat was becoming useless. For Miss America 62, another use was found. The aircraft was assigned to an Air Technical Service Command Unit at Victorville Field in California. It was later converted for weather reconnaissance and operated from Kindley Air Force Base in Bermuda. Instead of delivering bombs, the B-29 gathered information from the atmosphere over the Atlantic. A surviving Air Force photograph identifies serial 42-65281 in this role. The aircraft is approaching a storm, with an air sampling scoop fitted to the upper rear fuselage. The image belongs to a very different chapter from the photographs on Tinian. The same basic airframe remained, but its mission had moved from attacking weather-obscured targets to measuring the weather itself. At Kindley, Miss America 62 had become a WB-29, a long-range flying observation platform. That work helped keep it active, but every new assignment moved it farther from its wartime appearance. Military aircraft were repainted as units, and duties changed. Equipment was removed, added, or replaced. New markings covered old ones. The name painted on Tinian disappeared from view, but the metal beneath it remained. Later, the aircraft served as a target-tug at Randolph Air Force Base in Texas. A target-tug supported training rather than combat. It was far removed from the role for which the bomber had been built, but it gave the aircraft another reason to remain in service. Then, that usefulness ended. By about 1960, serial 42-65281 was transferred to the Naval Weapons Center at China Lake in California. China Lake occupied a vast area of high desert and supported the development and testing of weapons. Retired aircraft could enter its target inventory for experiments, training, or evaluation. Miss America 62 entered that system. The surviving accounts do not establish exactly where the B-29 stood during every year at China Lake. They do not show that it received a direct weapons hit, and they do not identify a documented decision to protect it from one. What is certain is that the aircraft remained there from about 1960 until 1985. For roughly 25 years, the bomber remained in a place created for testing weapons rather than preserving historic aircraft. The year in its name arrived during that period. By 1962, the newborn child behind the name had grown older. The wartime crew had long since returned to civilian life or other military duties, and the B-29 was already inside the China Lake complex. Miss America 62 had reached 1962. It did not reach it as a polished combat aircraft. It reached it as an obsolete machine whose useful flying career was nearly over. The years continued. The bomber no longer crossed oceans. It stood in the desert while jet aircraft replaced piston-engined bombers, and new weapons were developed around it. The B-29 became less a working machine than a collection of metal, systems, and missing parts. An aircraft did not need to be destroyed in one violent event to disappear. Sun, dust, and time could damage finishes, seals, wiring, and instruments. Components could be removed or vanish over the years. By the time preservation became possible, many parts were reported missing, yet the main airframe remained recognizable. China Lake had not preserved a complete wartime time capsule, but enough of the structure remained for the machine to be considered an exhibit rather than a target. By 1984, plans were being made to restore it. The surviving record does not explain why this particular B-29 had remained intact enough to remove. It does not identify one person who had quietly protected it, or one order that had guaranteed its survival. There was no single documented rescue moment. There was only an aircraft that had reached the mid-1980s in a condition that made a rescue possible. The next question was how to move it. The B-29 was almost 100 feet long, with a wingspan of more than 141 feet. It had been built to carry heavy loads through the air, not to travel along ordinary roads as cargo. It could not fly away. It could not be lifted intact onto a normal trailer. The complete aircraft was too wide, too large, and too fragile after decades out of service for a simple overland move. The same scale that had made the B-29 a strategic bomber now trapped it at China Lake. To save it, the team had to take it apart. In late 1985, personnel at China Lake dismantled the aircraft into major sections. Only the outline of the dismantling is documented. The aircraft had to be divided into sections large enough to preserve, yet small enough to handle and load. At the factory, its major assemblies had become one load-bearing machine. At China Lake, they had to be separated without losing the possibility of joining them again. Once apart, every section became its own transport problem. But there was no practical alternative. The bomber that could not leave China Lake whole would leave in pieces. Even then, the pieces were enormous. The solution came from another generation of military aviation. Major sections of Miss America 62 were loaded aboard a C-5 strategic transport for the flight to Travis Air Force Base. The C-5 had a cargo compartment about 144 feet long, longer than the entire fuselage of the B-29, and was designed to carry oversized military loads across long distances. Now that capacity was being used to move a dismantled bomber from the Second World War. The B-29 had once been among the largest aircraft in operational service. 4 decades later, it fitted into the logistics system of a much larger aircraft from another generation. The bomber that had crossed the Pacific under its own power left China Lake as freight. Miss America 62 was no longer the vehicle. It was the payload. After 25 years fixed at China Lake, the bomber's sections were moving through the air again. By 1986, the airframe had reached Travis. The flight ended the problem of removing it from the range, but it did not complete the restoration. At Travis, the team faced separated assemblies, missing components, and the evidence of several different military careers. Reuniting the wing and fuselage restored the outline of a B-29, but shape alone could not decide how it should be presented. The objective was not to return it to flight. The goal was a static exhibit that recovered the aircraft's form and communicated its history. That still required choices. Serial 42-65281 had worn several identities. It had been a wartime bomber, a post-war service aircraft, a weather platform, a target-tug, and a China Lake survivor. Each chapter was authentic. Only one could define the finished exterior. The paper record could identify the serial number and trace its assignments, but the most decisive evidence appeared on the metal itself. As volunteers stripped later paint from the nose, they began to uncover older marks beneath it. Lines became letters, letters became words. Miss America 62 emerged again. The artwork was not a modern museum design. It was a surviving physical link to the aircraft's wartime identity. A serial number connected the airframe to official records. A crew photograph showed it on Tinian. The paint brought those forms of evidence together on the object itself. The pieces delivered from China Lake were not merely the remains of some B-29. They belonged to the aircraft photographed with Captain Alger's crew. The volunteers did not give the aircraft a name. They uncovered the one it had carried all along. The discovery fixed the restoration's identity. The exterior could represent number 11 of the 24th Bombardment Squadron, with its Circle R tail and the name chosen in 1945. But the later layers were also part of the reason the name had survived. Weather reconnaissance had kept the aircraft in use after the war. Target-tug duty gave it another assignment. China Lake held it long after it could no longer fly. Each stage changed the machine, and each new finish concealed the artwork beneath another coat. The paint recorded both loss and continuity. It hid the name from sight. It also left enough of the name on the metal for the restorers to find. The work continued for years. Moving the aircraft to Travis had been one operation. Preparing it for public display was another. By June 1994, Miss America 62 was on exhibition at Travis Air Force Base. The aircraft standing there was not exactly the machine that had left the Martin factory in December 1944. Some original components were missing. Its configuration had changed during its post-war service. It had been repainted more than once, dismantled at China Lake, transported aboard a C-5, and reassembled as a static exhibit. It would not fly again. But the central airframe was still serial 42-65281. It had served with the 24th Bombardment Squadron, carried an 11-man crew, and, according to the group association, completed 13 missions. It then crossed through several post-war roles and remained at China Lake for about a quarter century. Then it had been taken apart to be saved. Its survival was not the result of remaining untouched. It survived because new assignments kept it useful after the war, because the airframe endured after that usefulness ended, and because people eventually found a way to remove it from a place where it could not leave under its own power. Each stage altered the aircraft. Each stage also carried it farther into the future. That is why the name beneath the paint matters. When Captain Alger's crew chose Miss America 62 in 1945, the name looked ahead to a year beyond the war. The aircraft reached that year, then remained at China Lake for more than 2 additional decades before its wartime markings were uncovered at Travis. By then, the future imagined in the name had become part of the past. Today, the B-29 remains on static display at Travis Air Force Base. Its engines will not carry it into the air again. Its restored exterior cannot show every assignment, alteration, and year hidden beneath it. But the name on its nose identifies a specific machine, not a generic representation. A bomber built for war became a weather aircraft, a target-tug,